Hey guys, tonight we slip into a scratchy woolen blanket in a dim, drafty hospital ward sometime in the mid-1800s. The gas lamps flicker. The walls smell faintly of lye soap and something a bit more human. Outside, horse hooves clatter over cobblestone streets, and inside, you lie awake listening to a patient 3 beds over cough with unsettling rhythm. The room is quiet, until nature calls. And now, it's your turn. You sit up, stomach turning, because the chamber pot sits at the foot of your bed like a squat little demon. It's metal, cold, and already a little full. You think about stepping down onto the icy floor in bare feet. No indoor plumbing here. Just you, your modesty, and the daily gamble of whether the pot has been emptied. Spoiler, it hasn't. You probably won't survive this century without an intestinal parasite or two, but while you're still here, we might as well make it comfortable. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lean back, letting your mind wander, and time rewinds. In the early 19th century, before nurses became the sanitary superheroes we know today, people handled their bodily functions with a level of grace best described as unenthusiastic surrender. Bedpans didn't exist in a portable form yet. There were chamber pots, essentially bowls with delusions of grandeur, heavy, awkward, and more often than not shared between multiple patients or family members. If you were lucky, you had one under your bed. If you weren't, well, you shuffled out into a hallway, maybe even outside, depending on where you were. In wealthier homes, servants discreetly managed your business. In poorhouses and hospitals, not so much. The pot might sit unemptied until the next shift, if there was a shift at all. The average hospital ward of the time was a cramped, smelly place where hygiene was considered secondary to discipline. Wooden floors absorbed more than just foot traffic. The scent of carbolic acid tried its best to mask the real star of the show, a robust bouquet of sweat, sickness, and body waste. Hospitals were more a place to die than recover. And here's a fun image: imagine trying to squat over a bowl in the dark, while wearing 6 layers of clothing, including a corset, in the middle of winter. Now try to do that quietly, with 6 other people in the room. It's no wonder half of Victorian literature revolves around mysterious wasting illnesses. The other half, I'm convinced, stems from people trying to hold it in too long. Nurses, if you could even call them that, were often untrained, older women who got the job by default or desperation. Their duties were broad: changing linens, delivering food, administering leeches, and yes, dealing with chamber pots. They didn't have gloves. The concept of germ theory was still more of a suggestion than a rule. One early solution involved placing makeshift boards across patients' laps and trying to slide something vaguely bowl-shaped beneath their posterior. This often resulted in spills, awkward shifting, and a fair amount of mutual trauma. The design flaws were legion: pots too shallow, rims too sharp, materials too cold, and worst of all, everything had to be done in silence, lest someone lose their social standing by being overheard defecating. Still, patients got creative. There are accounts of people stuffing cloth around the rims of pots to reduce the chill. Some wrapped the pots in towels for insulation. Others, brace yourself, used warmed bricks under the container, which occasionally cracked under the heat or shifted at a most inopportune moment. Historians still argue whether early hospitals actually encouraged this kind of inventiveness or merely tolerated it because there were no better options. Most documentation from the period focuses on the more glamorous parts of care: surgery without anesthesia, for instance, or the therapeutic use of mustard plasters. But bedpans? That was left out of the heroic narratives. Yet behind the scenes, it was this everyday struggle that eventually led to one of the most subtle yet significant medical inventions of the century: the portable bedpan. Not glamorous, not headline-making, but essential. Meanwhile, patients continued to improvise. One old diary mentions stuffing straw into a bucket to muffle the sound. Another features a drawing, crudely rendered, but charming, of a pot balanced atop stacked hymnals. There's no record of whether the hymnal survived the ordeal. And if you were bedridden with something chronic, tuberculosis, say, or the perpetual melancholy that seemed to afflict every poet under the age of 30, you had to rely on others. That meant lying in bed, waiting, hoping the nurse wasn't busy, and enduring until help arrived. Time moved slowly when you were in pain, slower still when your intestines had joined the protest. Even Queen Victoria herself, that paragon of tight-lipped propriety, reportedly hated hospitals for their lack of privacy and the noise of nighttime activities. Her physicians tried to make her hospital visits short and well-insulated from the grubbier realities of care. One apocryphal tale claims she once asked for her own personal chamber pot to be covered in lace. You have to admire the commitment to appearances. So here you are, back in your 19th-century hospital bed, the chamber pot mocking you from the shadows. You shift. You sigh. You wonder if it's worth it. And just when you think it can't get more awkward, the door creaks open, and in walks a nurse, bucket in hand, face pinched in concentration. She's seen it all before. She'll see it all again. And you, dear listener, are about to witness how she and her peers began to change everything, from the ground up. You don't envy the nurse. She's maybe in her 40s, though it's hard to tell. Years of lifting, bending, and breathing hospital air have aged her like a loaf of bread left too close to the fire. She wears a dull gray dress with sleeves rolled up, a stained apron, and that look of mild despair unique to those who know what's in the bucket they're carrying. You catch a whiff. Yep, you were right. Tonight, she's responsible for 12 patients, 4 of whom are feverish, 2 are dying, and all are human beings with digestive systems. She moves quickly, silently, efficiently. Her face betrays no emotion as she ducks behind a makeshift curtain, a wrinkled sheet on a clothesline, to help a man relieve himself. You hear her murmur softly, something about deep breaths and "will be quick." It's a ritual. Not for his comfort, no, that ship sailed, but for hers. The more she humanizes the task, the less it feels like hauling excrement in a metal bucket. You watch as she tucks the patient's bedding, props up his knees, and maneuvers the chamber pot beneath him in one fluid movement. She adjusts his gown, shields his dignity as best she can, and then, waits. There's a silence that stretches into forever, filled only with the gurgle of a nearby oil lamp. It's not glamorous. But it's necessary. Back then, nursing wasn't yet a respectable profession. It was what widows, spinsters, or poor women did when there were no other choices. They were often accused of being lazy, drunk, or simply dirty. You could be the most meticulous caregiver in the ward, but if you reeked of bodily fluids, and how could you not, you were lumped in with the worst. And yet, these women were the unsung engineers of hygiene. They didn't write books or lecture on sanitation. They just did the work. Every night, every hour, every shift, they encountered the same problem: patients who couldn't reach a pot, pots that were too heavy or too cold, or worse, no pots at all. One nurse in Edinburgh reportedly cut down wooden fruit crates to create makeshift support boxes for pots, hoping to make them easier to position under heavier patients. Another in Manchester tied cloth handles to the sides of chamber pots with strips of torn bed sheets so she could grip them without burning her fingers on the icy metal. These were ad hoc innovations, but they mattered. Still, hospital administration barely noticed. If anything, nurses were scolded for altering supplies. After all, the budget for waste management was just above candle stubs, and just below rat poison. Historians still argue whether these small acts of ingenuity were deliberate acts of resistance or just coping strategies. But one thing's clear: the nurses knew the system wasn't working. And they weren't waiting for the doctors to fix it. The situation became even more dire in the cholera outbreaks of the 1830s and 40s. If you weren't vomiting, you were having, let's call it, an accelerated lower body evacuation. Nurses were suddenly forced to deal with large volumes of infectious waste in tight quarters, using tools that hadn't changed since medieval times. And yet, the expectation remained: be clean, be silent, and for heaven's sake, don't drop anything. One particularly grim account from an Irish hospital describes a nurse balancing a full pot in each hand while navigating a slippery corridor. She lost her footing on a patch of lice-soaked floor and went down hard. One pot broke. The other spilled. No one helped her up. They were too busy pretending it hadn't happened. After that incident, she began tying the pots together with rope to make a crude sort of shoulder harness. Not ideal, but marginally less humiliating. Then there were the nighttime rounds, the dreaded 4 a.m. shift. That's when the pots were at their fullest, the patients most restless, and the lights barely burning. You creep behind the nurse as she makes her circuit. She checks each bed, listens for sounds, groans, shifting bodies, whispered apologies. She changes soiled bedding, cleans the pans, and wipes down the floor with a cloth that's more whole than fabric. Her hands are red from scrubbing, and it's only Thursday. You notice she always hums while she works. Quietly. A kind of lullaby for herself. Sometimes, patients didn't make it through the night. And it wasn't always the illness that did them in, it was the indignity. A slip, a fall, an untreated infection from poor sanitation. Death by bedpan was not an official cause on any certificate, but it happened more often than anyone wanted to admit. Yet amid this daily parade of indignities, some nurses began keeping notes. They tracked how long a pot took to fill. Whether certain foods helped reduce mess. Which materials retained odor. Which designs were easiest to clean. They weren't writing for publication. They were writing for survival. One such journal, discovered decades later in a trunk in Dorset, included sketches of what we'd now call the early portable bedpan, smaller, shallower, with curved sides and a soft cloth lining. The nurse who drew it labeled it, "For comfort and less slop." That was the entire pitch. Less slop. You have to admire the honesty. These women were inventors, even if no one treated them like it. And still, no official solution emerged. Hospitals kept ordering the same clunky iron pots. Doctors ignored suggestions. Patients endured. Nurses adapted. But change was bubbling, slowly, in the background, fueled by exhaustion, necessity, and the occasional uncontrollable gastrointestinal incident. Tonight, as you drift along this corridor of creaky cots and whispered groans, you pass a young nurse wiping down a patient's legs with a damp cloth. She looks up, brushes a strand of hair from her forehead, and smiles faintly before turning back to her work. She doesn't know it yet, but she's part of a quiet revolution. A shift not born from theory, but from messy, awkward, deeply human practice. And it's only just begun. You follow her out into the hallway, past a stack of wooden buckets and a row of aprons hung like flags in surrender. It's nearly dawn, and the smell in the corridor is layered. Ammonia, coal smoke, damp wool. You catch a whiff of what might be cabbage soup and regret it immediately. But for nurses in the early 19th century, this was the smell of progress. Because if it smelled bad, at least someone had tried to clean. Down the corridor, you hear a clatter, metal against stone. A younger nurse is struggling to balance 2 chamber pots on a wooden tray. She's new. The hesitation in her steps is palpable. She pauses, adjusts the tray, and holds her breath as she nudges the swinging door open with her hip. The pots tip dangerously, but she saves it. Barely. You wince anyway. There's a whispered joke among the nurses: one day, the chamber pot will be as easy as a teacup. They don't believe it, but the thought makes them laugh. And honestly, laughter is in short supply around here. Yet even amid the fatigue and foul air, innovation begins to germinate. Slowly, and almost invisibly. The women begin to talk. Not the kind of idle gossip people assume nurses do. But quiet, tactical observations. You know, if you wedge a towel under the base, it doesn't rock as much. I started asking patients to shift their hips first. Saves me a spill. I boiled rags in vinegar, smells like hell, but cuts the stench. It's not glamorous, but this is how the first generation of nurse inventors begins to form. Not in laboratories or lecture halls, but in corners of hospital wards, trading stories over soiled linens. Historians still argue whether this informal sharing system was a proto-professional network or just a coping mechanism. Either way, it was knowledge, raw, unfiltered, born from relentless proximity to suffering. And then, something shifts. Florence Nightingale arrives. You've probably heard her name. She's practically the Beyoncé of Victorian nursing. But what you might not know is that her influence on sanitation, and yes, on portable waste management, was as much about logistics as it was about ideology. When she walks into the Scutari military hospital during the Crimean War, she's immediately overwhelmed, not by the number of wounded soldiers, but by the filth. Overflowing chamber pots, unwashed bedding, and a floor slick with fluids. All of them. Her response is swift. She brings in scrub brushes, soap, and an obsession with statistics. She collects data on everything, including how long it takes for waste to be removed from a room after it's produced. She charts it. She graphs it. She writes angry letters to the War Office about latrine logistics. One of her more controversial orders. Replacing the traditional iron pot with lighter, enamel-coated alternatives. Why? Because she noticed nurses had fewer accidents when the pots weren't so heavy. She even suggests developing shallower models to minimize tipping. The surgeons roll their eyes. But the nurses cheer quietly under their breath. You might think she invented the portable bedpan herself. She didn't. But she made the system listen to the women who were inventing it every day, one awkward bedside visit at a time. In one of her letters, she references those infernal bowl spillings, and calls for an implement designed for discretion and mobility. That might be the most delicate way anyone has ever asked for a better poop bucket. But she had weight. When Nightingale spoke, politicians listened. Manufacturers listened. And so did doctors, grudgingly. Soon, the first wave of commercially produced bedpans began to emerge. They weren't pretty. Most were still metal, but now they came in slightly varied shapes, some oval, some curved, some with a more anatomical approach. And they were portable, or at least more portable than the dented soup kettles of the past. One English company introduced a model with a handle, not for the patient, mind you, but for the nurse. It was marketed as the modest solution, which was Victorian code for won't spill on your shoes. And here's where things get personal. One nurse from Sheffield starts modifying these new pans on her own. She lines them with boiled linen, adds a cork base to muffle the clatter, and stitches a small, quilted cover to place over the opening when not in use. Her fellow nurses are skeptical until they try it, and then they beg her to make more. Eventually, she partners with a local tinsmith. He adds her modifications to his production line. Sales go up. Nurses around England begin requesting this new model, softer, quieter, and, miraculously, less prone to slippage. It's not a revolution. Not yet. But it's the first breeze before the storm. Back at your side of history, you're watching all this unfold with a sort of drowsy awe. You're still on your scratchy cot, maybe the draft under your blanket is getting colder, or maybe you're just imagining it. But what's undeniable is that the way people treat bodily waste is changing, and not because a genius in a lab had a vision, but because women with sore backs and tired hands got sick of mopping up accidents. You shift your weight and imagine lying on one of these newfangled bedpans. Is it comfortable? Not really. But is it better than squatting in a tin bucket next to a snoring stranger? Oh yes. Unquestionably yes. These early inventions spread slowly, carried by word of mouth and letters between hospitals. Nurses traveled for training, and sometimes, they took their innovations with them. It was a quiet form of revolution, no banners, no protests, just an ever-growing network of women improving the world one less spilled bowl at a time. As dawn breaks, the corridor fills with light. You hear birds, faintly, and somewhere, the comforting hiss of boiling water. The nurses trade weary nods and wordless handoffs. The worst of the night is over. Morning brings new challenges, rounds, medications, the daily scrubbing, but also, perhaps, another idea. Another tweak. Another way to make one of the most undignified acts just a little more bearable. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you're proud of these women. Proud of the ones who carried buckets in silence, who cut their fingers on sharp pot rims, who dared to say, there has to be a better way. And soon, there will be. You awaken in the haze of early morning light, the ward still heavy with the residue of a night's labors. The faintest hum of conversation drifts through the wooden shutters, punctuated by the occasional groan or cough. Nurses begin their ritual anew, refilling water basins, airing out beds, and yes, preparing those infamous bedpans for the day ahead. You might think this is a straightforward task, but don't be fooled, the handling and design of bedpans carry an entire hidden history of trial, error, and innovation. You trudge alongside a seasoned nurse named Mary, who's reputed for her uncanny ability to manage a full chamber pot without spilling a single drop. She carries an arsenal of implements, a pan, a scrub brush, a sprig of lavender tied in a cloth bundle. Lavender, she claims, masks the more offensive odors, though you suspect it's also a little comfort for her own nose. You wonder how she keeps her hands from drying out or cracking in that harsh environment. Mary shares with you a curious tidbit. Back in the late 1700s, some European hospitals experimented with bedpans made of ceramic, hoping to create a smoother, easier-to-clean surface. Unfortunately, the pans were heavy and prone to cracking, and you can imagine the chaos when one shattered on a cold stone floor. Nurses, ever resourceful, favored metal despite its chill and clatter. Mary then shows you a set of sketches she's kept tucked away in her apron pocket, rough designs for a portable, ergonomic bedpan that includes a slight lip to prevent spills, a contoured base for comfort, and even a detachable handle. She's not alone in dreaming up these improvements. Across England, France, and the United States, similar ideas are circulating. A few enterprising tinsmiths and potters have begun experimenting with new shapes and materials, but it's still a patchwork of trial and error. You ask Mary how the patients react to these inventions. She shrugs, her eyes twinkling. Some say it's like sitting on a throne. Others, well, they'd rather hold it until the end of time. There's a humor here, dry and resigned, that speaks volumes about the intersection of dignity and necessity. Historians still argue whether these early prototypes directly influenced the standardized models of later decades or simply represented parallel developments born of necessity. But what's undeniable is the spirit of experimentation buzzing quietly beneath the surface of everyday hospital life. You watch as Mary carefully sanitizes a pan using boiling water, then dries it with a linen cloth. It's a delicate balance, too wet, and it drips, too dry, and the patient feels the harsh metal against their skin. There's an artistry here you hadn't considered before. Later, you accompany her to the hospital's supply room, a cramped, dimly lit space stacked with tinware, soaps, and linens. Mary points out the latest innovation, an enamel-coated bedpan. It's lighter and designed to reduce odor absorption. Nurses whisper that it's a game-changer, though some grumble about its fragility. This push for better materials reflects broader industrial advances of the 19th century, where enamelware became popular in households for its durability and ease of cleaning. But bringing such technology into hospitals was slow, budgets were tight, and skepticism high. As the day progresses, you note how the evolution of bedpans mirrors larger shifts in healthcare, attention to sanitation, patient comfort, and efficiency. It's not just about convenience, it's about survival. Hospitals were rife with infections, and improper waste management exacerbated this. Florence Nightingale's crusade for hygiene plays into this narrative, reminding us that medical progress often hinges on the mundane. You can't help but appreciate the ingenuity hidden in these unassuming objects. The humble bedpan is a testament to practical innovation born not from grand designs but from the gritty realities of caregiving. As evening falls, you reflect on the fact that while bedpans may seem like a minor detail, their development tells a story about how society began to treat its most vulnerable with a sliver more dignity. Tomorrow, the story continues, because when it comes to human invention, even the lowliest object can carry a profound history. You're back in the dim hospital ward, the evening light stretching long shadows across the floorboards. The day's bustle is fading, but the work isn't done. Nurses will in carts laden with soiled linens and clanking chamber pots. You notice the patterns, what time patients most often call for help, how the nurses navigate narrow corridors while balancing their burdens. It's a choreography that's been perfected through countless nights of trial and error. Tonight, your focus turns to a particular figure, a nurse named Eliza. She's known for her relentless curiosity and a knack for tinkering with tools. Eliza's modifications to bedpans have earned her quiet admiration among her peers, and you get the sense that she's about to make a lasting impact. Eliza's latest invention is a bedpan with a detachable, rounded rim designed to fit comfortably under a patient's hips. The rim can be removed for easy cleaning, a feature unheard of in most hospital wards. She explains that this design reduces skin irritation, a common complaint among patients forced to use rigid, cold pans. You ask her how she came up with the idea. She laughs softly, recalling a particularly challenging night when a patient's skin broke down from prolonged contact with a traditional pan. I realized, she says, that we needed something gentler, more like a cradle than a bucket. Her enthusiasm is infectious, and as she sketches out her plans on a scrap of paper, you can see the wheels turning in her mind. She dreams of mass production, standardized sizes, maybe even a softly cushioned liner someday. But it's not all smooth sailing. Eliza faces resistance from hospital administrators who view her modifications as unnecessary expenses. "We're here to care, not to reinvent the wheel," one doctor grumbles when she pitches her ideas. Yet, the nurses rally behind her, quietly spreading word of her design. This tension between innovation and tradition is a recurring theme in your journey. You realize that inventing a better bedpan isn't just about engineering, it's about challenging the status quo, often at personal cost. Meanwhile, word of Eliza's designs begins to spread beyond her hospital. Other nurses write to her, sharing their own adaptations and improvements. This informal network becomes a vital channel for exchanging knowledge and pushing the boundaries of what a bedpan can be. Historians still debate the extent to which these grassroots innovations influenced commercial manufacturers, but the evidence of their impact is undeniable. Nurses like Eliza paved the way for modern designs that prioritize both patient comfort and caregiver efficiency. Later, as you settle into the quiet of your cot, you think about the resilience and creativity that fuel this slow revolution. It's a reminder that sometimes, the most profound changes come from those closest to the problem, those willing to get their hands dirty, literally and figuratively. As night deepens, you drift toward sleep, comforted by the knowledge that these small acts of ingenuity continue to ripple through history, making life a little better for those who come after. You awaken to the soft clinking of enamelware being arranged for the morning rounds. The hospital is quieter now, as if holding its breath before the day's chaos resumes. You notice a new presence, a man in a workshop apron, meticulously shaping thin sheets of tin. This is Mr. Harper, a tinsmith known for collaborating with nurses to craft better bedpans, and you find yourself intrigued by his blend of craftsmanship and practicality. Mr. Harper explains that while nurses understand the patient's needs intimately, it takes a craftsman's skill to turn ideas into usable tools. His workshop smells of heated metal and beeswax, a strangely comforting scent that contrasts with the antiseptic hospital air. You watch as he bends a new pan prototype, smoothing its edges with careful precision. The goal, to create a lightweight, durable, and spill-resistant bedpan that nurses can handle with ease. He shares a quirky story. Once, he made a batch of pans with handles too flimsy to support their own weight. When the nurses tested them, the handles broke off mid-use, causing quite a mess and a burst of laughter. It was a costly mistake but an important lesson in balancing function with durability. Mr. Harper's collaboration with nurses represents a unique intersection of practical knowledge and artisanal skill. Nurses bring their frontline experience, he brings material expertise. Together, they iterate designs, test prototypes, and refine the bedpan's form and function. Historians still debate how widespread these collaborations were, but it's clear that such partnerships laid the groundwork for the eventual industrial production of portable bedpans. You observe the nurses' reactions as they try the new models, some praise the lighter weight, others complain about the cold metal against skin. It's a reminder that no invention is perfect from the start, it must evolve through feedback and persistence. Meanwhile, you reflect on how these developments coincide with broader societal changes. The Industrial Revolution is transforming everything from transportation to textiles, and even hospital equipment is not immune to its reach. Factories are beginning to churn out enamelware, making it more accessible and affordable. Yet, despite these advances, some things remain stubbornly traditional. Older nurses cling to their tried-and-true metal pots, skeptical of newfangled ideas. Change, after all, is hard when your hands have borne the weight of history. As the day unfolds, you sense a quiet revolution is underway, one not marked by grand proclamations, but by the steady, patient work of improving an object so unglamorous it's easy to overlook. You settle back on your cot, the smell of beeswax and heated metal lingering faintly in your mind, and you marvel at how human creativity can transform even the most basic necessities into tools of dignity. The days blur together in the hospital, but tonight, something shifts. You're alongside Sarah, a nurse who's quietly gaining a reputation for her methodical approach to patient care and waste management. Sarah has begun keeping detailed notes, not just about patient conditions, but about how and when waste is collected, and the impact on sanitation. You lean in as she recounts her findings. She's discovered a pattern: delays in waste removal correlate with spikes in infection rates. The longer a soiled bedpan sits, the greater the chance of illness spreading. Sarah's notes are precise, almost scientific, with times, dates, and cross-references. This kind of data-driven approach is rare among nurses, who often rely on instinct and experience over numbers. She tells you about her campaign to streamline waste collection schedules, convincing hospital administrators to prioritize this overlooked task. It's slow going, many doctors dismiss the idea, seeing bedpan logistics as beneath their concern. But Sarah perseveres, using her notes to argue for change. Her efforts coincide with a growing movement to improve hospital sanitation, influenced heavily by Florence Nightingale's pioneering work. Nightingale's emphasis on statistics and hygiene has inspired nurses like Sarah to bring data into everyday practice. Sarah's work even catches the attention of a medical journal editor, who publishes an article highlighting the importance of timely waste removal in preventing infections. It's one of the earliest formal recognitions of sanitation's role in patient outcomes, marking a turning point in hospital management. Yet, there's a quirky side to Sarah's research. She notes that patients are more cooperative when bedpans are clean and comfortable, an obvious fact, but one rarely recorded in official documents. She jokes that a happy bottom makes for a happy patient, a reminder that even in the grim realities of illness, small comforts matter. Historians still debate how much influence these early sanitation reforms had on the development of portable bedpans versus broader hospital practices. But Sarah's notes offer a fascinating glimpse into the day-to-day realities shaping medical progress. You watch as nurses carefully rinse and sanitize bedpans under Sarah's guidelines, the process now more regimented and efficient. The atmosphere feels different, less chaotic, more purposeful. It's a subtle victory in a long fight. As you lie down to rest, the soft rustling of linens and the distant murmur of voices become a lullaby. The humble bedpan, once a source of dread, is slowly being transformed through data, determination, and a little humor. Tomorrow promises new insights, new challenges, and the continuing story of how care and innovation intertwine in unexpected ways. You wake to a sudden thud, a metal pan hitting the floor. A patient groans, and a nurse curses under her breath. You rub your eyes and peer across the ward. Clara, a newer nurse, has just dropped an older-style bedpan that clanged like a cathedral bell as it spun across the wood. It's a reminder that even with all the minor improvements, the current tools are still awkward, clumsy, and prone to disaster. But instead of embarrassment, Clara bursts into laughter. "It's like trying to carry soup in a frying pan," she says. You chuckle too, and she grins. There has to be a better way. Clara, it turns out, has ideas of her own. She's been corresponding, quietly, and against regulation, with a former patient who now runs a small enamel workshop. Together, they've been toying with a new kind of portable bedpan. It's lower in profile, curved to contour the body better, and with a clever rubber edge that keeps it steady when placed on the bed. The idea of a rubber edge sounds almost futuristic for your 19th century surroundings. Clara explains that rubber has become more available since Charles Goodyear's vulcanization process took off. Most people think of tires and waterproof boots, but Clara sees potential for medical equipment. Still, this innovation is controversial. Some senior staff believe rubber will trap bacteria. Others scoff at nurses playing inventor. Yet Clara's prototype feels different when you hold it, lighter, quieter, and far less intimidating than the cold clang of tin or the hard rigidity of ceramic. It even feels friendly. As much as a waste vessel can. Historians still argue whether this wave of nurse-led invention ever made it to official patents or was simply co-opted by later industrial manufacturers. But many believe these unsung innovators laid the groundwork for what would become the modern, standardized portable bedpan. Clara has dreams beyond her prototype. She imagines a full nurse-led manufacturing cooperative, producing comfortable, hygienic care tools without waiting for bureaucratic approval. It's a bit radical. She whispers about it over tea and biscuits like she's proposing a revolution, and in a way, she is. Outside the ward, the world is changing fast. Steamships are crossing oceans, telegrams flashing across wires, and women, yes, even nurses, are beginning to organize, to agitate for recognition, for rights, for the chance to shape not just care but the tools of care. Clara's ambitions fit into that moment, that momentum. She's part of a larger current of change, even if she doesn't realize it. And tonight, she lets you help test the new bedpan on a willing patient. It's not a glamorous job, but it works, smoothly, quietly, with minimal discomfort. The patient nods in approval. "Better than that metal monstrosity," he mumbles. As you settle into bed, you feel oddly hopeful. Maybe it's the soundless hush of the new design. Maybe it's Clara's fearless grin. Or maybe it's the sense that history isn't always made by generals and kings, but sometimes by nurses carrying rubber-rimmed pots in the night. You wake slowly this time, the ward shrouded in an early fog that seeps in through cracked window panes. A quiet hum pervades the room, not just of sleeping breath and rustling sheets, but of something else. Anticipation. Today, a visitor is expected, a government health inspector, no less. You sense the staff tightening their routines, smoothing their aprons, and polishing the enamelware to a mirror-like gleam. As you follow Nurse Bridget through her morning rounds, you notice she's replaced all the metal bedpans in her section with the newer rubber-edged models, Clara's design. Bridget's not a rebel by nature, but she's practical, and she wants to see if these improvements pass muster under scrutiny. The inspector arrives just past noon, with a mustache that curls like a question mark and a clipboard that looks like it could summon the heavens. He observes, asks polite but pointed questions, and takes copious notes on everything from the spacing between beds to the temperature of the boiled water used for sanitizing equipment. When he reaches Bridget's section, something unusual happens. He stops, peers at one of Clara's bedpans, and, after a long pause, smiles. "Innovative," he says, as if the word tastes new. "This wasn't on the official inventory." Bridget tenses. You hold your breath. The inspector flips the bedpan over, examines the seam, and raises an eyebrow. "Where did this come from?" Before Bridget can respond, Clara appears beside her, back straight, voice steady. "It's a local model, sir. We've been field testing it for better patient comfort and sanitation. To your surprise, the inspector nods approvingly. There's a push in Parliament for medical equipment innovation. Especially from those with experience on the floor. He writes something down. Might be worth reporting. It's a small moment, but electric. Clara's design, born of frustration and persistence, might soon reach beyond the ward. That evening, Bridget and Clara gather with a few others in the back laundry room, away from prying eyes. There, they pass around a crude catalog, a self-made booklet featuring sketches of improved tools, bedpans, urinals, wash basins, even a foldable bedpan cover that doubles as a privacy screen. The nurse's companion, they call it, half in jest. You help Clara make copies using a messy inkwell and a hand press borrowed from the local schoolhouse. Pages smear. Fingers stain. But it feels like something more than ink, something real is being recorded here. A quiet revolution of caregivers, fed up with waiting for someone else to fix the basics. Historians still debate the actual influence of these early catalogs. Some argue they were dismissed by formal medical boards. Others say they inspired later commercial lines by subtly shaping demand and expectations. Regardless, you can feel the sense of power among these women, nurses turning inventors, turning entrepreneurs, if only in whispered secrecy. A fringe idea emerges. What if hospitals could request nurse-designed equipment directly? What if manufacturers listen to the people who actually clean the bedpans? As the nurses disperse and the ward settles down, you lie awake thinking about that moment, the inspector's rare praise, the ink-smudged catalog, the absurd power of a well-designed waste vessel. Tonight, the idea of progress doesn't feel so distant. It feels handmade, rubber-edged, and possibly, just possibly, on the verge of being recognized. The rain taps gently on the windowpanes tonight, a lullaby of droplets as you move through the dimmed corridor. There's a new scent in the air, something almost floral. You follow it to the corner of the ward, where Nurse Henrietta is carefully unpacking a shipment wrapped in linen. Inside, a dozen brand new bedpans, gleaming white, with cobalt blue rims and delicate handles that almost look ornamental. Imported, Henrietta whispers, half amused, half wary. From Germany. They're ceramic, but lighter than the usual stoneware models. The glaze is smooth, nearly silken to the touch. A small logo on the underside depicts a cherub perched on a cloud, of all things. It feels absurdly refined for an object designed to catch human waste, but that's precisely the point. The German manufacturers have caught on. Bedpans, once hidden, now whisper status, at least in wealthier clinics. Henrietta snorts softly. Just what we needed, luxury bedpans. Still, they're undeniably elegant, and soon the other nurses gather around, testing the balance, admiring the smooth glaze. Patients, too, seem oddly comforted by the clean aesthetic. One older gentleman declares it a pan fit for a duke. You learn that Germany has become a leader in medical ceramics, especially in the Rhineland region. Their exports are in high demand not only for hygiene, but for prestige. Owning imported bedpans signals progress, refinement, maybe even modernity. There's a strange truth to it. Hospitals that once hid these objects under beds now display them in open carts, clean, gleaming, respectable. A quiet shift has occurred. The stigma around waste is slowly being dressed in dignity, thanks in part to aesthetics. Still, not everyone is thrilled. Clara frowns at the imported models. They're pretty, sure, but they're breakable, and they don't stack well. Her concerns are practical, grounded. And you realize that while these ceramic imports may look the part, they're not necessarily better. The nurses return to their rubber-edged, enamel-clad local versions when the wards are busiest. This divide grows. On one side, industrial beauty, curated for upper-class clinics and private patients. On the other, grassroots functionality, designed by those who actually use them. Historians still argue whether this aesthetic turn was progress or a distraction. Did fancy ceramics really improve care, or just appease wealthy donors. One fringe theory suggests the rise of decorative bedpans helped normalize hospital fundraising events. See how clean and modern we are. With some even displayed at medical exhibitions. Henrietta shows you a pamphlet from a recent London expo. Sure enough, there's a 2-page spread showing off the sanitary porcelain of the future, complete with overly dramatic lighting and gushing testimonials. But back in the ward, a nurse frowns as she tries to balance one on the rickety wooden commode. It wobbles. The patient grimaces. "It's beautiful," the nurse mutters, "but it's still a bloody bowl." You laugh quietly. There it is, the truth in the midst of ceramic glamour. As night draws in, you feel that tension settle over the ward, the push and pull between form and function, between innovation for comfort and innovation for show. And in the dark, it's the soft-edged, rubber-lined, nurse-made pan that sits quietly under beds, doing its job without complaint. You close your eyes, thinking not of cherubs on clouds, but of hands, working hands, shaping tools that matter, one practical improvement at a time. Another foggy dawn creeps in, and you find yourself pulling blankets tighter against the chill. Outside, horses clop by on cobblestones slick with dew, and inside the ward, something new rustles among the linen shelves, pamphlets. Dozens of them. Titled, "Portable Comfort, Innovations in Patient Sanitation," these humble leaflets are being distributed to hospitals, training centers, and, most surprisingly, midwifery homes. You spot Clara and Bridget flipping through one. Their faces are unreadable at first. Then a smirk, a glance, and a laugh. Because on page 3, there it is, a drawing unmistakably based on Clara's prototype, minus the rubber edge but identical in shape and handle placement. Reimagined, the pamphlet claims, by our engineering team. But the nurses know better. The pamphlet's publisher, a London-based manufacturer called Ketterly & Sons. They've taken the nurses' handmade innovations, refined them, and claimed them as proprietary designs. And this isn't the first time. Several tools pictured, adjustable bed cradles, curved wash basins, bear eerie resemblance to sketches from the nurse's companion booklet created in secret months ago. You feel your stomach twist. There's admiration here, your ideas have traveled. But there's also frustration. None of the original nurses are credited. Not Clara. Not Henrietta. Not any of the women who bled knuckles and burned hands bringing these tools into being. Clara calls it theft with polish. Bridget calls it typical. They wait for us to invent it, she mutters, then slap a label on it and sell it back to us. Historians still debate how frequently nurse-originated designs were co-opted by commercial manufacturers. There are no surviving contracts, no letters of agreement. Only overlapping designs, altered just enough to escape notice, or challenge. It's a quiet, uncredited revolution. Still, the impact is undeniable. These new commercial bedpans are lighter, easier to carry, and stackable. Some are even being produced in colored enamel to help distinguish clean from used, an idea Clara herself floated months ago. The success of Ketterly's model spreads fast. By year's end, they're in hospitals across England and even reaching as far as colonial outposts. You hear stories of military nurses using them in barracks, grateful for their portability and sturdiness. There's something deeply ironic in it all. An object so intimately associated with waste is now a product of international trade and commercial pride. And yet, in the break room, the nurses toast with lukewarm tea to their unofficial empire. A fringe nurse named Dora pins a copy of the pamphlet to the wall with a sign beneath it, designed by ghosts. It's part sarcasm, part protest. They may never print our names, she says, but we're everywhere now. The others nod. Because even if the history books forget, the work endures. Later that night, you help Clara repurpose a few old tins into makeshift molds. She's still designing, still experimenting, now with collapsible sidewalls to make storage easier. Innovation doesn't stop, even if credit does. You drift off thinking of all the unrecognized hands that have shaped your comfort tonight. The ones who understood that dignity starts not with applause, but with a clean, warm place to sit when you're at your most vulnerable. The air tonight carries the sharp scent of coal smoke and disinfectant, an odd but strangely comforting combination. You move slowly through the hospital's new annex wing, opened just weeks ago to accommodate the swelling patient load. It's brighter here, with gas lamps along the walls and new floor tiles that don't creak with every step. Progress is creeping in, inch by inch, even if some parts of the old ward still feel like relics from a time when leeches and superstition ruled. But what really draws your attention tonight isn't the lamps or the tiles, it's the gleaming row of new portable bedpans, all identical, stacked like quiet soldiers in a stainless steel trolley. These are the Ketterle standards, Nurse Dora announces, rolling her eyes just slightly. Same ones they're using in India now, apparently. You pick one up. It's smooth, coated in light blue enamel, and curved with a strange sort of elegance. There's even a faint stamp underneath, Ketterle Medical British Patent. It looks nothing like the clunky tins from just a few years ago. Nothing like the handmade rubber-lined versions Clara used to pass around in secret. But you recognize the soul of it, the shape, the angle, the discreet handle. Someone else will pick up the work in a boardroom. But for now, they were tested, it's enough. Quietly, in this very ward. Dora sighs. They've made it uniform now. Standard issue. Universal fit. As if all bottoms were created equal. Still, there's no denying the benefit. These pans are easier to clean, lighter to carry, and less likely to clang like a dinner bell when dropped. And the patients? They're grateful. Even the grumpiest among them seem to complain less. One patient, Mr. Phillips, a retired sailor with too many stories and not enough teeth, leans over to tell you something between coughs. This here pan's better than the deck buckets we had in '62. Didn't spill on me once. High praise, you suppose. Outside the walls of this hospital, you begin to hear murmurs of something more structured forming, a formal nursing registry. Training academies. Certification processes. The idea that nurses should not only care for patients but have official voices in how care is structured. The profession is solidifying, and with it comes the possibility that one day, a nurse might be the one holding the patent, not just the handle. Historians still debate the birth of modern medical standardization. Some point to 19th century Britain, others to the military hospitals in colonial outposts. But nearly all agree that the standardization of tools, like the now ubiquitous portable bedpan, played a quiet, foundational role. But with uniformity comes loss. You overhear Clara complaining that the new models don't accommodate certain patients well, especially those with spinal injuries or hip trauma. The one-size-fits-all approach flattens the nuanced care she used to provide with her handmade versions. So, she does what she's always done, she modifies. She lines one pan with padded cloth, adds a folded towel under the handle to reduce wrist strain, and quietly returns it to a patient's room. No one needs to know, she says, winking. You realize something important as you watch her work. Industrial standardization may dictate the shape, the color, the name. But care, the real, human part of nursing, still belongs to the nurse. To those who see each patient as unique. To those who understand that even a small comfort, like a quiet, clean, well-designed bedpan, can change the tone of a night. One of the younger nurses, barely out of training, asks you that evening if bedpans were always this fancy. You grin and whisper about the old tin ones that could burn your skin and echo through a ward like cannon fire. She shudders and laughs. Thank goodness for progress, she says. Yes, you think. But thank goodness, too, for stubborn nurses and secret catalogs and rubber edges no one remembers to credit. As the gas lamps flicker low and the distant hoot of an owl carries through the open window, you lie back and let your body sink into the quiet. The trolley of blue bedpans stands watched nearby, unassuming, ready, just as they should be. Tonight, the hospital is oddly still, as if even illness has decided to take a short nap. You walk the corridors with less urgency, your steps muffled by freshly scrubbed floors and the hush of patients actually sleeping. The portable bedpans are where they always are now, clean, stacked, uncomplaining in their metal cradles. But something else is brewing in the break room. Clara is at it again. This time, she's not alone. Around the table are three younger nurses, huddled close over a blueprint. It's not a bedpan, well, not exactly. It's a design for a full bedside sanitation kit. Compact, foldable, and modular. A care station, as they're calling it. One nurse has even taken to calling it the battlefield box for bedpans. You crouch beside them, peering at the inked lines. There's a compartment for clean linens, a slot for the pan, a hook for the privacy drape, and even a tiny side chamber for soap and cloths. It folds down into something that looks vaguely like a picnic basket, but instead of strawberries and sandwiches, it's carrying the means to restore dignity to someone too weak to rise. Clara beams. Imagine this in disaster zones, in tenement houses, in places where there's no plumbing but still people needing care. The others nod. It's about reach now. Not just improving the tools in polished hospitals, but taking comfort and cleanliness to those who've never had access before. Historians still argue whether these bedside kits ever entered formal production. Some say they inspired later Red Cross supply boxes. Others believe they were simply prototypes, used in the field, admired, and lost to time. But for the nurses in this room, it doesn't matter. The idea is what matters. The intent. You help fold the prototype, latching the tiny clasp. It clicks shut with a satisfying snap. Somehow, this little box feels heavier with hope than all the blue enamel bedpans in the ward. Out in the hallway, you hear the scuffle of boots. A man in military uniform passes by, hat tucked under one arm. War is in the air again, faint but growing. You catch a phrase, field hospital readiness. Your stomach dips. Clara watches him go, then turns to you. If they take us again, we take these with us. There's no fear in her voice, just resolve. Because unlike last time, she's prepared. This time, the tools won't have to be improvised from buckets and firewood. This time, nurses carry design as much as they carry duty. One fringe nurse, Evie, quietly admits she's been writing letters to a cousin in Canada. Apparently, she's sent sketches, descriptions, even one of the old rubber-rimmed models. They've got nothing decent out there, she mutters. Even the hospitals are using saucepans. You blink. Global influence. International design piracy. Nurse-to-nurse exports. It's not official, but it's happening. Beneath the formal medical systems, there's a web of shared hacks, handwritten instructions, borrowed ideas, carried in pockets and minds across oceans. Later, as the nurses trickle back to their rounds, Clara stays behind, rubbing her temples. We can't stop them from stealing it. But we can keep making it better. She holds up the new box again. And one day, someone will ask where it really came from. As you drift off near the fire-warmed corner of the break room, that idea stays with you. Not the injustice of forgotten inventors, but the stubborn continuity of care. How something as humble as a portable bedpan becomes, in the hands of someone who sees, a tool of quiet revolution. And perhaps, one day, even recognition. The fog outside is thick tonight, the kind that settles into your coat and your bones. Inside, the hospital glows softly under gaslight, each ward lit like a quiet little universe. You're back in the old wing now, the place where it all began. The worn floorboards creak underfoot, and the familiar scent of carbolic and lavender soap wafts faintly through the air. You head to the storeroom, expecting to find the usual stack of pans and linens. But something's different. A brass plaque has been mounted beside the supply shelves. You lean in close and squint to read. Dedicated to the innovators of everyday care, anonymous, but never forgotten. No names. No dates. Just that. Dora appears beside you with a small, crooked smile. "Someone higher up must have grown a conscience," she says. "Or maybe they just got tired of us asking." The nurses have been quietly pushing for recognition, not for fame, not even for money. Just acknowledgement. And while a plaque might seem like a token gesture, here, in this place, it feels monumental. Still, you notice a bitter edge in Clara's voice that night when she reads it aloud. "Anonymous, huh? That's tidy." You can't blame her. All the blueprints, all the burns and breakthroughs, and still, the official record clings to vagueness. The manufacturers have prospered, the names printed in medical supply catalogs belong almost exclusively to men, some engineers, some doctors, most never having handled a bedpan in actual use. Historians still argue how much of the 19th century nursing innovation was quietly erased. Some say it was deliberate, an effort to maintain male dominance in medicine. Others believe it was simply societal inertia, the usual invisibility of women's work. One niche theory even blames Victorian ideals of modesty, suggesting no one wanted to talk too much about who invented what in the realm of human waste. And yet, change has come. Slowly. Subtly. You see it in the training manuals now, which include whole sections on patient dignity and bedside tool design. You see it in the improved plastics being tested in labs across the country, moldable, hygienic, lightweight. A far cry from tin and ceramic. And while no one is officially naming names, the language has shifted, field-tested by nursing staff, adapted through bedside experience. One small win at a time. In the meantime, the work goes on. Clara is now mentoring the younger nurses, teaching them the little hacks, the towel fold that prevents bedsores, the wrist angle that prevents spills, the whisper that calms a frightened patient during a vulnerable moment. And always, the portable bedpan remains at the center of it. Not a marvel of engineering, but a tool of profound practicality. It's not just about sanitation, it's about giving people their dignity when they have almost nothing else. You spend the night shadowing a new trainee, Martha. She's nervous, all shaky hands and whispered apologies, until she kneels beside an elderly woman with such gentleness that even the older nurses pause to watch. She steadies the patient, slides the pan underneath, and holds her hand the whole time. Not out of necessity, but out of respect. Later, as she washes up, Martha turns to you. "I used to think bedpans were gross. Now I think they're kind of beautiful." You nod, because you've come to understand that too. A quiet revolution doesn't always end with parades or headlines. Sometimes it ends with a cleaner, more comfortable night for someone in pain. Sometimes it ends with a brass plaque no one expected. And sometimes, it doesn't end at all, it simply passes hands, like a well-worn blueprint, from one pair of capable hands to the next. You return to the old break room, where Clara is asleep in a chair, her boots kicked off, a folded towel beneath her neck like a makeshift pillow. A final blueprint rests on her lap, something new, always new. You smile, gently pull a blanket over her shoulders, and settle into the silence. The plaque outside may read "Anonymous," but in this room, and in the way care is given across every hospital wing that followed, their names are written everywhere. Tonight, it rains, the gentle kind, steady and whispering against the hospital windows like it's trying to soothe the entire building to sleep. You walk slowly through the now familiar halls, past carts and cots, past linen bins and patients curled under wool blankets, and you realize, the bedpan, of all things, has come to represent a kind of quiet culmination. Everywhere you look, its presence is normalized now. No more rusted tins stashed in shame under beds. No more whispered improvisations. Just efficient, discreet, ready tools, a core part of a nurse's arsenal. You pass the supply trolley in Ward C, where a student nurse is confidently lining pans with cloth, preparing for the night shift. She doesn't blush, doesn't flinch. She's been taught this is normal, necessary, and worthy of care. And it is. The portable bedpan is no longer a punchline. It's not a relic or a workaround. It's a given. The standard model has changed again. This new one is made from a flexible, semi-rigid polymer. It's light, stackable, and even slightly contoured for ergonomic comfort. The handle has been redesigned for a better grip, with subtle texturing that feels secure in the hand. It even has a color-coded lip to match hygiene protocols, green for sanitized, red for used. You smile. Clara would have loved that. Though she's retired now, her influence lingers. Nurses still share her little tricks. Her name is passed around like a secret spell. "That's a Clara fold," one trainee says proudly, demonstrating a clever towel technique for positioning. In the staff records, she's just another line item, no awards, no patents, but in the ward, she's legend. Historians still argue which hospital deserves credit for the modern bedpans form. Some say Edinburgh, others point to Manchester or an early hospital in Canada. But beneath all the debate is a truth that refuses to be papered over: it was the nurses. Always the nurses. And not just Clara. There was Bridget, who burned her forearms testing boiling methods. Henrietta, who hand-sewed the first soft liners. Dora, who documented every change with maddening precision. And dozens more, whose names aren't recorded but whose fingerprints are on every curve of the tool that changed how patients are treated. The international reach has grown, too. In India, local nurses have adapted the design again, swapping materials for affordability, reshaping it slightly for different anatomical needs. In South Africa, they've added a privacy screen that folds directly out of the carrying case. In Brazil, you hear, someone's developed a biodegradable liner for use in rural clinics with no running water. All of these evolutions build upon the original spirit, dignity through design. Tonight, the nursing station feels different. Quieter. More peaceful. As though the work of all those decades has begun to settle into the bones of the building itself. There's no grand celebration, no medals, just steady hands and quiet care. You stop by the new nurse orientation board. Someone has posted an article, photocopied and pinned under a magnet shaped like a teacup. The headline reads, "Portable bedpans, the unsung heroes of medical history." You grin. Progress, perhaps. Someone is finally talking about it. Nearby, an old patient dozes in a reclining cot. You recognize him from earlier rounds. He's resting easier now, and beside him, under his bed, sits a clean, empty bedpan, shiny, ready, unremarkable in the best possible way. That's the quiet revolution. That's what all the burns, blisters, and sleepless nights bought. And you? You slip outside as the rain continues its gentle rhythm, and you breathe in the scent of wet brick and lavender from the courtyard bushes. You think of Clara, probably sitting on a porch somewhere, wrapped in a shawl, reading by lantern light, grumbling that no one ever spelled her name right. You smile, not with sadness, but with something softer, pride, maybe. Or peace. Because in the end, the story isn't about who got credit. It's about who cared enough to make things better. The rain eases into a hush now, like the sky itself is getting sleepy. The hospital, once a swirl of urgent footsteps and midnight whispers, settles into a deep, well-earned stillness. Somewhere, a kettle clicks off, a soft drawer slides shut, and the last patient of the night drifts into a quieter kind of dreaming. And you lean back, your spine melting into the chair, your breath sinking with the slow rhythm of rest that hums across these long-remembered halls. Everything is softer now. The clatter of enamel, the rustle of aprons, the quiet tick of clocks marking time not in seconds but in care. The story of the portable bedpan wasn't thrilling. It wasn't grand. But in its own unglamorous way, it mattered, because it was about listening, adapting, and honoring the body when the body couldn't stand on its own. It was about dignity, whispered into the smallest acts of design. You picture Clara, not in a spotlight, but under lamplight, measuring, muttering, rinsing out one more prototype with cracked, red hands. You picture a nurse on a battlefield, knelt beside a soldier who barely notices the pain anymore, except for the warmth of the hand that lifts him with care. You picture the quiet pride in a trainee's face when she gets it right, no spills, no shame, just decency. And maybe, just maybe, you'll carry a little of that gentleness with you when you wake. Not to invent anything, perhaps. But to notice what matters, even when no one else does. The rain has stopped. The windows fog, the halls darken, and the last light flickers out. Sleep now. Let it all go. Let the old stories fade and the new ones form quietly behind your closed eyes.